Alright, welcome back to today's lesson on multiplying and dividing negative fractions. And hopefully it won't come as a surprise to you to realise that the same rules we learnt for multiplying and dividing negative numbers also applies here. So, what did I do? Just wrote negative again. That's a mistake. I should have written numbers. Alright, so here are the shortcuts that we learnt, or the patterns we learnt earlier in the year, but I'm going to add a little part in there to show that this is multiplying and dividing. So in here we could have multiply or divide. So that means that a positive multiplied by a negative is a negative. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. Alright, so these shortcuts are going to help us answer some of the questions. So to give you a few examples, we might do something like this. 2/3 times negative 4/5. Now, the reason I write the negative 4/5 with brackets around it is so that we know that the 4/5 is negative, and the brackets show that it's a number. It's negative 4/5. All right. So let's have a look at our shortcuts. We've got a positive multiplied by a negative. So that's up here, positive multiplied negative. The answer is going to be negative. All right, so once we know that, we just go through with the multiplication. Same rules as fraction multiplication, numerators and denominators. 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 5 is 15, and we make the answer negative. And that's minus 8/15. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? So another example might be something like this, minus 6/5 times minus 3/4. All right, now you notice that the first fraction I haven't put brackets around, but even though there's no brackets there because it's the first one, we know that that is minus 6/5, and that is minus 3/4. So looking at our two fractions, we've got a negative times a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. So the answer here is going to be positive. So we follow the rules for fraction multiplication, numerator by numerator. 6 times 3 is 18. 5 times 4 is 20. And there is my answer. And we notice that 18 and 20 have common factors. Common factor is 2. So if I divide both by 2, I end up with 9/10. And that's my simplified answer. A couple of examples of fraction division. We might have something like minus 2/5 divided by minus 3/4. So again, let's look at our shortcuts. We have a negative divided by a negative. That's up here. Negative divided by a negative. The answer is positive. So once we know that, we can dive straight in. We can say to ourselves, I remember how to divide fractions. We change the division sign to a multiply, and we turn over the second fraction, making sure to keep it a negative. And then we follow our steps for multiplication. Multiply numerators, we get 8. Multiply denominators, we get 15. So you can see that the answer is positive, and you can put the positive there if you want to, but you don't have to. Positive 8/15. Another example is 1 1/3 divided by 3. Sorry, it's minus 1 1/3 divided by 3. Now, I'm not sure if I've explicitly told you yet, but to divide or multiply mixed numbers, it's easiest if we convert them to an improper fraction. So how many thirds are in 1 1/3? The answer is 4 thirds, and it's a negative. So 4 thirds divided by 3. We remember that 3 is the same as 3/1. So the problem becomes minus 4 thirds divided by 3/1. We also remember that the pattern to dividing fractions is to change it to a multiply sign, turn the second fraction over, and then just multiply. So denominators, numerators. Oops, wrong way around. Numerators, denominators. 4 1s are 4, 3 3s are 9. And because I didn't do it at the start, we have a negative times a positive. Looking back up here at our shortcuts, negative times a positive is a negative. So the answer is going to be negative 4/9. And we can write it there like that. All right, so to recap, multiplying and dividing negative fractions is the same as doing multiplying and dividing negative numbers. The patterns we learnt earlier in the year still hold true, and the process for division of fractions is the same as with negative fractions. All right, we change the divide sign to a multiply, turn it over, and then multiply numerators and denominators by each other. Remembering that if we can, we should be simplifying fractions at the end.